diagnosed with dyslexia?
I was never formally diagnosed with dyslexia, no.
So how did you find out you had it?
I basically just by how I read and how I did things and how I wasn't able to actually read things aloud and figure things out. So I figured that's kind of what I had because of the way I mixed things up.
Was anyone in your family diagnosed with dyslexia?
No.
What are your hardest subjects?
Hardest subjects would have been English was my toughest subject.
What was your less difficult or easiest subject?
Science and history probably were my better subjects.
What about math?
I did okay in math. It wasn't one of my better subjects.
Okay. Did you have problems with letters or numbers? Did they get like reversed or?
The biggest problems I have were more trying to put letters together to make words and sentences. I have a big problem with phone numbers and getting those in the right order. I'll mix those up from time to time. And I also have problems writing checks. Sometimes I'll get the numbers mixed up when I'm writing checks.
Okay. How many books have you read from cover to cover?
Cover to cover in my life, probably maybe 2 to 3 books.
What were they?
I read Animal Farm was the one that I read. I actually read that book twice.
You have?
Other books that I would have read would have been more books to you and your sister when you were growing up that we would sit and read and things like that. But very few books have I read cover to cover.
Okay. Have you told anyone that you had dyslexia?
I mean, some people know. I really don't forecast it, but and I guess I don't use it as a crutch to say, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. I just have found ways to get around it and make things work and find different solutions to be able to learn and get things
Do you
fixed up.
take medication for dyslexia, or is there a medication for dyslexia?
I don't know whether there is. I don't take anything.
Okay. Were you ever punished?
There have been times when, because of the dyslexia, I would read things improperly, and rather than sit down and say I have a problem, I would either make a joke out of what I read, and obviously because I did it and made a joke out of it, I would be punished for that. I was never punished because I had dyslexia. It was how I got around saying that I had dyslexia, and rather than fess up to it, I would just take whatever punishment came my way because I did things wrong.
Okay. Did you get any help with your dyslexia?
I can't say that I've ever had anybody that would sit down and say, oh, here, this is what you can do, or do different things and how I read and stuff like that. A lot of it was just that I would, like I said, figure out different ways to learn, so I would learn the same subject matter, but not have to read it or do things that would require me, because for me, to read is excruciating. It takes forever to read a book or read a page. I don't know whether part of that is dyslexia, which was just difficult to read, so I didn't read. Part of it was that I never truly learned how to read properly. I guess dyslexia may have been part of that I just never could comprehend and read fast enough that if I had to base all my learning just on reading, that it would take me years to do a course that most people would do in probably a couple weeks.
Did your parents ever know about it?
I think they had some idea about it, but no, because I compensated for it in other ways, they never became a problem for me in school.
With dyslexia, how did you become a veterinarian?
Well, I mean, obviously I figured out different ways to learn things. I would say Cliff Notes as far as in school when somebody had me have to do something for English or do book reports. Cliff Notes are little pamphlets that give you a synopsis of what it is, so I could read a book in a fourth the time it would take me to read the book normally and just get things done. I relied heavily on study groups where everybody else would do the work in the study and then I'd just listen to them. And because I could remember what we did in the study groups,
Did you contribute at all?
yeah, I would contribute. I mean, I had my views on things and where things were at. And I mean, I can, with time, I learned how to read, and I learned, I guess a better way was I learned how to read my professors on what they wanted to know and kind of what questions they were going to ask,
Mm-hmm.
so that I could pinpoint my studying to what needed to be studied. I probably have, I wouldn't call it a photographic memory, it's more of a phonographic memory,
Mm-hmm.
that I could sit down and listen to a group of people talk about something
And then remember that.
and then
later.
remember that later, and much to their dismay, in a lot of cases I would get better grades on the test than they did,
Even though they studied. More.
even though they studied more than I did.
That's pretty funny. Let's see here. What obstacles did you face while having dyslexia?
Well, obviously it's difficult to be able to read a book. I mean, I have been able to learn bits and pieces and been able to say, if you bring up a book, obviously I've never read it, but I know enough of the parts and pieces of it that I can have a conversation about it and act like I read it.
Mm-hmm.
So it just allows me to BS my way around having to know how to do things.
I sort of do that too.
But it allows me to act informed, even though in a lot of ways I wasn't. And that's probably the biggest thing I have with it. Like I said, I've been able to figure out things on how do I do this, how do I do that. And fortunately, because of my memory, I can keep it all in my head and I'm not going to forget about it. So I can regurgitate it back out later to be able to know things, but not being able to read and read well obviously hinders me in a lot of things. I mean, reading out loud is by far my biggest fear in the world.
Because you don't know what you're saying.
Well, in some cases that's true. So if someone asks me to read out loud on the spur of the moment, it's terrifying to me.
I don't like reading aloud either.
But if someone asks me to do something and I can study and practice on it, then I can do it later on. But I can't do it straight off the spur of the moment because I may misread words, and obviously in my mind that makes me look stupid, and I don't want to look stupid in front of people because I'm supposedly smart.
You are very smart. Okay, I think that's about it.
What's the next question?
They're all basically the same. Okay, let's see here. They're all basically the same. Last two.
Pretty much it.
Yeah, pretty much that's it.